In this section, we will be factoring trinomials. So remember, a trinomial has three terms. As you can see in example 1, an example of one of those is x squared plus 11x plus 18. So when I ask you to factor it, our goal is to get this so that we have two factors being multiplied together. You'll usually see them written in parentheses like that. So what we're going to do is we are going to think about it as if it was like the reverse of the FOIL method. So I call this reverse FOIL. So let's go ahead and try this problem. We have x squared plus 11x plus 18. Everything in this section has just a 1 in front of the x squared, which means that we don't write anything in front of it. So for now, the only thing that you're going to look at is this middle term with the 11 and the constant term, which is the 18. So first of all, when you do this type of problem, you're going to start with an x and an x. Now, these two terms are always going to be x's unless x squared has a coefficient other than 1. So in this case, everything in this section is only going to have a coefficient of 1. So you don't really need to worry about those two things until next section. So always start off with x and x. The next thing you're going to do is look at our two numbers that I have underlined, the 11 and the 18. So what you want in this part is you want these last two numbers, including their signs, to multiply to whatever your constant term is. So in this case, our constant term is 18. So these numbers are going to multiply to 18. The other thing is they need to add to whatever our x term is, whatever the coefficient of that. So in this case, they are going to add to 11. So from there, you do not have to do this, but sometimes when I'm first doing this, I will always start out by making a little table. So it's always a good way to start by thinking of everything that we know of that multiplies to 18. Luckily, these numbers are all positive, so we don't need to worry about anything negative. So multiplying to 18, we can have 2 and 9, we can have 3 and 6, and we can have 1 and 18. So now, from there, we know that these three possibilities all multiply to 18. The other thing we need them to do is we need them to add to 11. So I'm going to find the sum of each of these. So the first one's looking pretty good already. I get that 2 plus 9 is 11. I'm going to put a smiley face just in case, though we'll check the other two. So 3 plus 6 is 9. That one's not going to work. 1 plus 18 is 19. That one's not going to work. So we know that our top numbers there are going to be the ones that work. So then we are going to use 2 and 9. So our answer is going to be, start out with your x and x. Since everything is positive, we're going to put plus and plus. We're also going to have 2 and 9. Also, it doesn't matter what order we do it in, so you can actually have the 9 first and the 2 second. That's also fine. So the last step that I recommend that you do is to check it. So to check it, you're going to do multiplication using the FOIL method. And you'll find that in the end, if you use the FOIL method, you get x squared plus 9x plus 2x plus 18. Thankfully, we do get the right answer from that. We do get what we started with. So we know that we're good, and our answer is going to be this. For the next example, please pause and try it on your own. So for this one, we are going to factor it by trying to figure out what numbers add to 8. You're always going to go for the middle number. You want it to add to the middle number, and you want them to multiply to 12. So you always want them to add to the middle number, which is your x term, multiply to the last number, which is your constant term. So we're going to start by writing these out, and we want to think about numbers that go into these spaces that will add to 8, multiply to 12. I'm going to do this by just writing all the things I know of that multiply to 12, and then finding their sum. So first thing I know is 1 and 12. I also know 3 and 4, and 2 and 6. So what I'm going to do is find the sums of all of these. So 1 plus 12 is 13. That one's not going to work. 3 plus 4 is 7. That's closer, but it also doesn't work. 2 plus 6, however, adds up to 8, which is what I want. So I want numbers that multiply to 12, add up to 8. 2 and 6 are the ones I'm looking for. So in the end, I'm just going to fill in those blanks. My answers are x plus 6 and x plus 2. So this example is a little bit more complicated because now not everything is positive. So what I'm going to look for, I am going to look for numbers that add to -5 and multiply to +6. So immediately you might notice that something is up because you want numbers adding to a negative. What I'm going to start with is I'm going to list everything that multiplies to 6. However, you'll find immediately that some of them aren't going to work out at all. So things that multiply to 6 can be 1 and 6. We can also have 2 and 3. However, we also know that -1 and -6 will multiply to +6. And -2 and -3 will multiply to +6 also. And since we're looking for things that add up to a negative, that's going to tell us that these two right here are not going to work because those add to a positive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the two that add up to a negative. -1 and -6 add up to -7. Make sure you're careful about your adding of those because otherwise you might make a mistake. -2 and -3 add up to -5, which is actually what we're looking for. So the way that you're going to write the answers here, you're going to start with n and n. Then you're going to put in -2, you're going to put in -3, and that's your answer for that one. If you want to go back and double check using the FOIL method, feel free to do that just to prove to yourself that it does work. So this is another problem similar to number 3. Go ahead and try it on your own. Pause it and try it. So for this one, once again, we have a negative and a positive. So we want things to add up to this middle number. So we want them to add to -10. We want things to multiply to our constant term. So we want them to multiply to +16. So I'm going to go ahead and list out everything that I know multiplies to +16. And since I know that I want it to add up to a negative number, I'm not even going to bother listing only positive things. I'm going to start with -1, -16. I also have -2, -8. I also am going to have -4 and -4. So you'll find that when you add these together, you have -17, -10, and -8, and we'll notice that -2 and -8 are the ones that we want. So the way we write our answer is by starting with those x's and then put in the -2, put in the -8. Our next example is the hardest type of all. We have two negatives. So what we want is we want two numbers that are going to add to -4 and multiply to -32. So now, if you remember your rules of adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing negatives, the way that you would get a negative when you're multiplying is by doing a positive times a negative. So you're going to have one number that's positive and one number that's negative. The other thing that's weird about this is, since we have one positive, one negative, it actually is going to be more similar to subtracting. So think about it that way, that we're going to be thinking about it in terms of subtracting. So I know it's confusing the first time you try these ones, but just do the best that you can for now. We'll do a lot of practice, so the more that you practice it, the easier it'll get. So I'm going to look at things that multiply to -32. You'll find as you get more and more things that it's going to be really, really hard to list out all of the possible factors. So I want you to see if you can think about any two numbers that multiply to -32, and that when you add them or subtract them, you get something like -4, +4. So the two that come to mind usually when you're thinking about multiplying to a 32 and adding or subtracting to 4 would be 8 and 4. So now we know that one of them must be negative, one of them must be positive. What we're going to do is we're going to test them both for a negative and a positive. So the 8 is going to be both. We're going to try the first one where we have a -8 and a +4. We're going to try the second one where we have a +8 and a -4. So then when we find our sum, you'll find that the first one is -4, the second one is +4, and this top one right here is what we're looking for, so we know that our answer is going to be -8 and 4. So now we're going to write our solution as x and x, then you put in the -8 and you put in the +4. Make sure that you get the right sign with the right number, otherwise it's going to be wrong. You can do it in a different order, that's fine. The only thing that matters is that the 8 is negative and the 4 is positive. So either of these two answers is okay. So go ahead and pause and see if you can get this one on your own. So for this one, once again, we're going to start out with x and x. The key thing here is we need things that add to -3 or subtract to a -3. In this case, it'll be subtracting, and we want them to multiply to -18. So the best way to do this is to think about everything you know of that multiplies to 18, where you can subtract them and get 3. And few things that come to mind are going to be, you'll find that 2 and 9 multiplies to 18, 3 and 6 multiplies to 18, and 1 and 18 multiplies to 18. However, 3 and 6 are the only ones where if you add or subtract something, you'll get 3. So I'm going to rewrite them, and since we're looking for a negative, we're going to do one positive and one negative. Make sure that you test out both, and you'll find that when you add them together, that one gives you -3, the other one gives you +3, so the one that we want is -6 and +3. So our answer is going to be x minus 3 and x plus 3. So here's another one that's a little weird because we have both a positive and a negative, but you'll notice it's slightly different from examples number 3 and 4. The reason is because we want them to multiply to negative 50, and we want it to add to positive 5. So I'm going to go ahead and start by writing out what I know I'm going to put in. I'm going to start with my x and x. Now I need to figure out what the other two things are going to go in the parentheses are going to be. So multiplying to negative 50, since it's a negative number, I need to make sure that I have one positive and one negative. And if you think of all the things that can multiply to negative 50, there's really only one set of numbers that can add or subtract to 5, and that's 10 and 5. So I'm going to do positive 5 and negative 10, and also negative 5 and positive 10. So when you take the sum of those, 5 and negative 10 is going to be negative 5. Negative 5 and 10 is positive 5. So this one right here is what we're looking for. So we're going to get x minus 5 and x plus 10. And that's my answer. So this example involves solving an equation. And it actually is not too much more difficult than the ones that we've previously been doing. It's just that we're going to combine this section and the previous section. So we always start out by making sure it's equal to 0, which it is. So we're good on that one. So it must be equal to 0. I'll actually write that on the side because it's very important. So once we verified it's equal to 0, we now are going to see if we can try to factor it and also bring down our equal 0. So starting off with x and x, we then end up getting that we need to find two numbers that multiply to positive 6 and add to negative 5. We'll actually find that those two numbers are going to be negative 2 and negative 5. So our answer is going to be x, I'll rewrite it like that, x minus 2 equals 0, x minus 3 equals 0. Remember this from the last section. I'm going to add 2 to both sides. I get x equals 2. Right here, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. I get x equals 3. So these are my two answers. So I'm going to give you one more that I would like you just to try on your own. Although if you want to watch me do the first step, I can. So we're going to solve x squared plus 2x equals 24. So the one thing I'm missing from that I had in the previous one is that it's not equal to 0. However, I can change that by moving over that 24. So then from there, I'm going to get x squared plus 2x minus 24 equals 0. From there, I'm going to, if you want, you can pause and try it on your own now or just keep watching. Then I'm going to factor it. I get x and x. Now I need to think of two numbers that multiply to negative 24 and add to positive 2. So if you want to list out all the possibilities you can, you will find the two that work are going to be positive 6 and negative 4. So from there, we are going to set each of these equal to 0. That gives you x equals negative 6 and x equals positive 4. So that's our last example if you are not in the honors class. However, if you're in the honors class, there is one more to go. So the next example is for honors only. So if you're not honors, this is completely optional, but feel free to watch anyway. Alright, so here we have a rectangle, and I'm telling you the entire big rectangle below has an area of 117 square inches. and we're going to try to find the width and find the shaded area. So if you're feeling like you're really good at this stuff, go ahead and try it on your own. If not, I will go through it. So in order to find the width, we unfortunately need to solve an equation. What I'm going to do is I am going to start by figuring out what we can write the area as. So I know that the side is W, and this whole entire length, I showed it in pink, is going to be the sum of the 2 and the W plus 2. So it's W plus 2, and then also plus another 2, which gives me W plus 4. So then my total area, which I know is 117, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually write it as that width, which is just plain old W, times the length I just wrote out, which is that W plus 4. Since I know that's the area, and I know that the area is 117, I'm going to write it out like that. Okay, so from there, I have several things that I need to do. Unfortunately, none of them are very easy. So I'm going to start by using the distributed property with this W. That gives me W squared plus 4W equals 117. So in order to solve this equation, I am going to move over the 117, rewrite it as W squared plus 4W minus 117 equals 0. So then from there, I'm going to factor it. Now, I'm going to start with a W and a W. To fill in the other two blanks, I need to come up with numbers that multiply to 117, or excuse me, negative 117, and add to positive 4. Unfortunately, these are not easy to find. Generally, if I give you something like this on a test or quiz, the numbers will be slightly easier to work with, but figured I would give you the hard one now and I would solve it for you. So the two numbers that are going to multiply to 117 and add to 4 are actually going to be negative 9 and 13. So I end up getting W minus 9 equals W minus 9 times W plus 13 equals 0. So in order to solve that, I'm going to set W minus 9 equal to 0. I'm going to set W plus 13 equal to 0. My two answers there are W equals 9 and W equals negative 13. Now, if you're thinking about width of a rectangle, we can't have a negative width. So this negative 13 is not going to work. So our answer for that one is going to be just 9. So my width is 9 inches. The second part of this is finding the shaded area, which once you find the W is really very easy. So we know that this shaded area has the bottom of it has a length of 2. We know that W, our width, you may not recognize this, but it's this part right here. That's going to be our W, which we now know is 9. And you just multiply 2 times 9, which gives us 18 square inches.